Sister Christian, oh, the time has come.
Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Confusianity podcast. This is episode 3. Today I'll be talking with my sister. And as you may have heard already in episode 1, I tell the story of me coming out of religion, and I talk a bit about my upbringing and my childhood, growing up in the military, growing up as a pastor's kid, and all that. And today, you'll get to hear the perspective of my sister, who grew up in the same environment, obviously as a female instead of a male, growing up in the military and growing up in the church. So you'll get to hear her take on things, and also how it's shaped her as a person, and how she's evolved over time and become the person she is today. So yeah, let me start out with that as the first question. How would you describe your childhood in terms of, let's focus on specifically on the influences of religion as well as growing up in the military? Starting with those two as the main foci, but also you can feel free to expand on other influences as you feel comfortable.
Okay. Wow. So that's a lot to summarize. I guess I would start by saying that my first experience of religion, I think, was really based in fear. So I think that has a lot to do with our dad. But also, there were a lot of scary images in the church. And there was a lot that I didn't really understand. But I did understand that you're supposed to do good and that bad people go to hell. And I was very afraid of that. And I mean as a young child, like 4, 5, 6, that sort of age. So I remember every time they would have an altar call kind of thing, or vacation Bible school or whatever, I always used to say, oh, I accept Jesus into my heart. Like I must have done that like I don't know how many times.
Because you would go up and do it a second and third and fourth and fifth and however many times just to make absolutely sure.
Yeah. And, because I don't want to miss out on that.
Don't take any chances.
Right.
Yeah.
Just one more time couldn't hurt, right?
Yeah.
Like, just to be sure. So, not that I was obsessive or anything either, but
Right.
That notwithstanding, I was really afraid. I was afraid of a lot of things. I think that was enhanced by the military, which, the job of the military is to kill people who are trying to kill you. So, fear is kind of a thing. It's sort of inherent in everything. And
so it's like a double fear influence as a young child with the military and the religion, Christianity thing.
There's always a war, yes.
Yeah.
Yes. And the war analogy and the Christian soldier and
onward Christian soldiers.
And, the breastplate of faith and all of that kind of jazz. That's none of those analogies were lost on me.
And the helmet of salvation.
Yes. Right.
Yep.
And I really wanted to fit into that world. And, I always say in the military, there's 2 genders. There's male and wrong. And clearly I was wrong. And I remember from as young as I can, wanting to be accepted. And in the church and in the military and in society. And I'm sure that was magnified by the fact that we moved all the time. And I always felt like an outsider. Well, I kind of was an outsider for multiple reasons. But yeah, there was a lot of fear. There was a lot of that I didn't want to acknowledge, that I didn't like. And I was always trying really hard, to do stuff that would show that I could be tough and masculine, which how athletic I'm not, and how much of a challenge that is.
Yeah.
So really fighting an uphill struggle there. But in addition to that, really trying to know everything I could. And, I was a good learner. So, I soaked up Bible stuff like that. And, I got all my pins for Sunday school attendance that we still have downstairs, I think, somewhere. And, 30 years later, which is a little ridiculous. Really? Do you remember we would have mom or dad would have to write a note for us if we went somewhere else and went to church and the Sunday school there? we would have to go back to our Sunday school, and we would take a note from our parents saying that we attended Sunday school somewhere else.
Really?
So we would get credit.
I don't even remember that.
Yeah.
Huh.
That's insane.
Huh. Wow.
Yeah. So
this is the thing why I also feel like it's interesting to talk to you about our childhoods, because I think you remember a lot more of these little details than I did.
yes.
But like these are the things that affected me and shaped me subconsciously that I'm not even aware of a lot of times.
Yeah, you had those badges too.
Yeah.
Yeah. We both had them. We both had
Yeah.
our letters that we to take to our Sunday school teachers, who, now I realize are really like, random housewives and
Right.
people who volunteer and
Right.
19-year-old college students and what have you.
Yeah.
Like, why do they care?
Well, like the thing is, even somebody who's ordained or like a priest or whatever,
sure.
it's just a dude in a robe standing up there telling you
Sure.
shit. Like Bill Burr has a bit about that.
Yeah,
and
I
it's
like that.
It's just interesting, like the authoritarian structure and these roles, and people just fill those roles, and they just have authority by default because they're in those positions.
Absolutely.
And especially when you're dealing with children underneath them, children are taught to just obey authority and obey
Yes.
adults and parents and authority figures.
Yes. And when your dad is, when you're going to Thanksgiving dinner and you walk up to the mess hall and there's, 200 soldiers and they all jump to attention and salute when you walk by with your dad, that sort of reinforces the idea that he has some authority. Mm-hmm. It's kind of hard to ignore. And when he's up on the pulpit every week and wearing the robes, he's God and general in one. That's a lot of authority. And he took that on. He definitely liked to wear that.
He enjoyed that.
Yeah. So
for sure.
He did not downplay that one bit. And I remember he would tell me things. I never had a sense really of just blindly trusting what people said. I always kind of had a sense that I knew stuff and that maybe I knew more than they did. And I don't mean like in an arrogant way, but, like I would correct Dad's grammar.
Mm-hmm.
And I was correct.
Mm-hmm.
And he was incorrect. Like, I always had a sense that there are some things that just, I know, it's okay.
So when you say they, you mean...
authority figures.
Okay.
So on the one hand, I was frightened of them,
Yeah.
and I really wanted approval and acceptance and validation from them. But on the other hand, there's always been this nagging feeling that they may not know really everything.
Right.
So I got kind of two sides of that. They're all powerful in terms of punishing me, but they really are not equipped to protect me because they don't know stuff. So they really...
I guess maybe because you were a girl, you felt that more than I would. Like they were supposed to protect you, or but
I always knew, I never felt that they had any clue what my life was like.
all these authority figures.
Well, Mom and Dad specifically.
Okay.
And I thought that accurately, I thought that their upbringing was completely different than mine. I thought they had no concept of what it was like to be a kid in an American school, to be a brown kid in an American school. And, Dad would say stuff like, when you're a doctor, everybody will be, and they're sweeping the street. I don't know why the streets always needed sweeping, but when everybody else is sweeping the streets, they'll look up to you and they'll want to be your friends then. I knew that was not true. And I knew I also didn't care. I wanted to have friends now.
Right.
And I knew that being smart is like, being really nerdy. It didn't take me too long to figure out that that's not the route to popularity in school.
Yeah.
Like, you're not going to be the most popular kid if you're the one who always throws off the curve. And, Lisa Simpson is not the most popular kid in school.
It's funny you bring that up because I always thought of that, like how I'm like Bart Simpson, even though I wasn't a troublemaker, but I'm like Bart, you're definitely more like Lisa.
Yes.
So even though we both got A's and we went through all the classes, like I played sports and I was into all that stuff more than you.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. And you're just naturally funny.
Thank you.
Yeah, and I'm naturally serious, and I just
Right.
didn't. Yeah. Anyway, so I forgot why we got on that tangent, Lisa Simpson. But that mom and dad
I
didn't
wonder
know.
when my seriousness. It's interesting to hear you say that because people would describe me as a serious person now. But
Yeah,
like
I see
as
that.
a kid, I think I was just such a goofball.
You were always a goofball.
Yeah. All I wanted to do was play.
Yes.
Like video games, soccer, anything.
Yeah.
So school, church, all of these things were drudgery that I just had to do. So I sat through and bared them, but I didn't like it. But I
Right.
just did my duty because that's what you're supposed to do.
Right.
And I couldn't wait to get out of school, both literally for the day to go play, but also to ultimately get out of school with college and get out into the workplace, where I've actually enjoyed life in the workplace far more than being in school. Because you check out of work and then you're like, oh, I got money now and I can go play, essentially.
Yeah, sort of.
Yeah, do what you want to do, spend your money and,
Yeah.
you know.
Sure. But yeah, I didn't think that mom and dad really had a clue what was going on in my life. I mean, because friends really were everything, and they did not seem to have their finger on the pulse of American society. And
Right. You're saying for normal kids in America, or really anywhere in the world, I guess, just kids growing up in a society when you're 8, when you're 10, when you're 12, when you're 14, when you're 15, 16, friends and your role in high school and grade school, that's what life is.
right.
Yeah.
Right. And yeah, and you know, partly it's specific to us, I think, because dad has a way of, and I think this is a little bit more with me because I'm the firstborn than with you, but of seeing us in as projections of himself, and where he's only able to see us as one-dimensional and in a certain way,
Right.
which I knew was not accurate. And
I can see now when you explain all of that way, how it would lead you to question authority ultimately. Although you're still submitting to it the whole way because you have to.
yes,
That seed was kind of planted at an early age to question authority. Like, because you feel like there's something off about their authority. Like, yes, they have it, but they're not necessarily right, or they don't necessarily, how do I put this? They have the authority, but that doesn't necessarily mean they're the end all be all, and you should just accept that.
yes. Well, the whole point of having power is that you can protect your stuff, right? You can take stuff from other people and you can protect your stuff. That's generally what people use power for. Except I felt like they couldn't protect me. So I felt like maybe, I mean, it's kind of like the US and, you know, bonds, treasury bonds. It's like, well, we lose our credit rating, but still everybody goes and buys treasury bonds because that's the best there is. Like, you know, it doesn't make any sense, but so they have the best authority that's around, but they really can't do anything to help me. They're only there to hurt me.
And when you say they, you just mean authority figures in
I
general?
mean,
or like
yes, exactly. And my job
military and parents and...
is to, you know, fit in and get approval from them and then live my life in my mind. I think that's one of the reasons I liked reading and liked writing, as that was just my own thing.
Yeah.
And so there's always been these little things that I kept away and kept in the back of my mind.
Okay, well, let's see. So you grew up in the military as an army brat in a religious upbringing, Christian, with a father who's both of those things, military and a pastor, a chaplain in the army. So you're saying how it shaped you in terms of your experience and views of authority figures.
Yeah, that's a good way to summarize.
Yeah. So moving on from that, how would you describe your actual faith in Christ or your identity as a Christian? How did that evolve over time? You mentioned about how every time at a young age, like 4 or 5 or 6 years old, that you would go up and say, oh, I'm saved today, I'm saved today. So
Right.
whichever one was the real one. Clearly, you like accepted Christ as your Lord and Savior and said the magic words and all of that at a very young age,
Right.
out of fear, largely.
Right.
So you basically identified as a Christian very early on in your life, and you carried that forward into your teenage years, into turning into your 20s. So how would you describe that evolution from your childhood into teens into your 20s and beyond?
I think maybe because I was so isolated and in my own head, I had some pretty wacky thoughts, but which maybe we could save for later and come back to at some point. But when I was about 12-ish or so, and I was in a Christian school, that's when I, quote, for real, became saved. So that's what I always thought of as the real time.
Okay.
Where it wasn't just out of fear and where I didn't have to keep doing it over and over again.
Was there a specific day or time that you remember, like when you got saved or anything like that?
I remember that day. I don't remember what day it was, but I remember the
I'm surprised
experience.
actually that you don't remember.
I know, right. Which is telling maybe. But I remember the experience and I remember saying a prayer. And I was all by myself. And I think the principal... we had chapel twice a week. We had a sermon twice a week in school and before lunch, which is not a good time to have.
Because you went to a Christian school for
7th and 8th grade.
Yeah, middle school, right?
Yeah. So he said something, and I don't even remember what it was, but he said something that day, and it kind of stuck with me, and I thought about it, and I went home and I thought about it, and as they say, I prayed about it. And something clicked and I thought, okay, well, I'm accepting Christianity not out of fear. And I really had a sense about it that it was true. Mm-hmm. I went through high school and I was very active in the youth group and all of that kind of stuff. And they were my primary friends. And then, I went to college, way too young. And I mean, literally too young. I was 16. But also too young maturity-wise. I really did not know what I needed to know. I certainly was not socially adept enough to live on my own and be able to manage things. So, I mean, logistically I managed things.
Yeah.
And I, got to all my classes and got all my books, but...
Yeah, most people at age 16 are not going off to college and then starting med school at 18.
Yeah.
That's not most people.
Right. I mean, when I went off to college, the first week I was at college, like, we went to go see, this is funny, we went to see Total Recall. This is how old I am now. And I was so stressed, and I was amazed, because I had my college ID, and I showed that. It was rated R.
Right, and you had to be 17.
And I couldn't get into rated R movies, back home,
right.
Like when I went out with my high school friends. So, and
you were nervous about getting in.
I was, and they just let me walk in.
Yeah.
And I thought, oh, wow, that's amazing. But yes, I was still worried about how to get into a rated R movie and how to make friends and how to do all those kinds of things. Yeah, I didn't have friends, really. And then I was
college, as you
in
started.
college, yeah. And I was very lonely, and then I got sucked into this relationship, which was, which I guess I thought I was lucky to have because, no one was ever interested in me before. And
back in high school.
And I really was not good at making friends. So, so I was, really kind of set up for that. So I got sort of committed into that, and that ended up being an abusive relationship, which I stuck with because of Christianity.
Yeah.
So here's the thing. He was not a Christian, right? And so we met in late November, early December. And, we went out a couple times. He wanted to still see me. And he was kind of interesting. But he wasn't a Christian. Mm-hmm. And... I was like, oh, okay, this is kind of a problem. So we talked about that, that I was like kind of nervous about being involved with somebody who wasn't a Christian and I wasn't sure about this. And then we went to winter break. We were gone for a month. And then when we got back together, like when we came back to school in the winter, He said he accepted Christ. He said he was a Christian, which
Okay.
wasn't actually true, but he said that.
Okay.
And I was like, oh, okay, that's fine. So,
So now we can date, and
now
it's okay.
we can, and we can be hunky-dory. And then after a while, it was sort of apparent to me that his idea of being a Christian was not the same as my idea. And, he had a kind of a broken childhood and horrible parents. And he never had really experienced unconditional love. So how could he possibly understand? This is why he's screwed up about Christianity. This is why he doesn't understand God and why he can't have faith.
Wait, this is what you were thinking in your head?
Thinking. Yeah, is because...
About him saying he's a Christian, but really it's not playing out that way?
Yeah, his father left the family and was going off and sleeping with who knows whoever, and never really paying any attention to him. So if that's what your earthly father does, how can you understand a heavenly father?
Right.
So all the deficits in his actual faith and in his practice of Christianity, I really attributed to that. So, and I thought, oh well, I must be, because
did God put you there to
yes,
sort of witness to him and help him? Yeah.
Exactly. So that must be why I was there. And in all these kind of superstitious ways that we have of thinking about things.
We read into every little thing.
Exactly.
This must be from God, or is there some purpose or some meaning to this? And
absolutely.
Yeah.
And that's what I thought. Must be why I went to this school, because it was kind of a fluke that I ended up there anyway. And this must be why I met him, and this must be the whole plan, right?
Yeah.
So we were together, and he was a young kid and I was a young kid, and we were not, we didn't have sex. And we weren't anything more than what your average high school kid.
Well, back then, the average high school kid. Nowadays, average.
Well, actually, not even that. Probably the average middle school kid. Back then, that's kind of the level of what intimacy.
The relationship was.
But to me, that was.
Is that the first person? Did you fall in love?
I wouldn't really say that. But yeah, but then I felt totally committed. I'm like, well, it'll be okay if we got married, because it'll still be only with this one person. But it really falsely attached me to him in yet another way. So I was attached out of guilt.
Yeah.
Even though I didn't even really want to do those things, but he's a guy and he kind of wanted to do those things. And I really needed him because I was lonely.
Right.
I didn't have anybody. And
real quick, did you try going to any of the other Christian fellowship kind of things?
Yeah.
I would have thought that's the first place you would have jetted to.
I did. And I was going to Bible studies this whole time, and...
So didn't that become your friends and your social network and your...
No. It was a jock school, and even the Christians went to frat parties. They were all athletic and on sports teams and kind of dodo heads, really. I always... and I am a very peculiar intellectual. I have very weird thoughts about stuff that come from all of these eclectic influences that make absolutely no sense, and that no one else in the world has except perhaps you.
I was just thinking in my head, I'm like that too.
Yes, well, there's that. But, yes, yeah. Coincidence, surely. So, the fact that we're having this conversation and there's a cuckoo clock from Germany up on the wall, and some thing from India in the next room, and we just finished eating gluten-free muffins, and none of this makes any sense.
Right. The vase from Japan that was here, and the
right, it just, none of it makes any sense.
Right.
So, and we're talking on this podcast, you can't understand this. I can't understand this, and I'm living this. So it doesn't make any sense. But
I think that's what makes it extra hard for kids when you're a teenager and you're just trying to fit in.
Yeah.
Is you get the sense of I'm all of these million different things that don't add up to being normal or fitting in and having friends and being liked and all that stuff. So it leaves you feeling more alone, more isolated, more...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and it was a very mainstream school, so, everybody there was
You probably would have done well if you went to Reed College.
Yeah.
where it's supposed to be all about, just
Sure.
individual exploration.
Yeah, I really needed to go to a small, very eggheady liberal arts school, with really smart people. But that's not where I went. I went to a Big Ten school where they didn't even have like recent books in the library, but they still spent, I don't even know how many thousands of dollars to expand the stadium that was to make it the biggest in the Big Ten.
Yeah.
Like,
Right.
is this really necessary? Like, what? I don't even care. Like,
Yeah.
okay, so you have a football team, that's lovely. But is that really why we're all going to school, apparently? Is that why we're paying tuition?
It's interesting because, like, when I really stop and think about it, I know you. I've known you for the 41 years I've been alive or whatever. And it's like, you went to the wrong school. You dated the wrong guys. You married the wrong guy.
We got the right dog, though.
Yeah, we love our dogs. I don't know if you can hear that, but that's one of our dogs sighing in the corner.
Yeah.
But I feel similarly about my own life, but I feel like for you especially, it was just like always the wrong things and the wrong people and the wrong influences and the wrong decisions in your life.
Yeah. And I mean, somehow, I don't know how I do this, but somehow I always manage to be like the minority of a minority of a minority.
Mm-hmm.
So, I was in this specialized program in college where you're conditionally accepted to medical school right out of high school. So you do 2 years of college straight through. So you do summers and then you go straight to medical school. And yes, and I graduated early from high school. So I did the whole thing like way too young.
Yeah.
And committed like, the next, 12 years of my life and basically planned out all of my 20s. And I decided all of that when I was 15.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's stupid.
Right. Right.
Right? Like, I should not have done that, but I thought it was God's calling.
Yeah, and also that's what our Indian parents would want.
Sure. And that's also what Dad told me.
Yeah.
So, and that's also what Dad wanted to be. And I would get, kudo points from Dad if that's what I ended up being. And then I joined the Army on top of that. And like, oh, I'm going to be a general and a doctor. Like, that's perfect for Dad. So, and what a great reflection on him that would be.
Right.
So, the general that he couldn't be and
also,
the doctor that he couldn't be.
Right. And yeah, clearly that will make you happy.
Oh, yes. Right. But, when you're 15, you want to make your parents happy.
Right.
That's appropriate developmentally, maybe.
Well,
when you're 12, I guess it's appropriate.
I don't know. Like in Western culture, I
10,
think a lot of
maybe.
American teenagers, they reach a point where they hate their parents, they rebel. I think they kind of lose that, like wanting to please their parents-ness. And they're a little bit more like, fuck off, I'm my own person.
Yeah.
I don't know about you, but I didn't go through that phase then.
Yeah, I did in some ways, but not in other ways. Definitely not in other ways.
Definitely not in the course of your education and career.
No, and definitely not substantially. I felt like Mom and Dad made a big deal about things that I'm doing stuff that you approve of, and yet you're picking on all of these little things, which now in retrospect, I kind of think they were, I still think they were. Like, I was a really squeaky clean kid. Just, I mean, now I see teenagers as my clients, and wow, I was a super squeaky clean kid. Like, oh my gosh. I can't believe I got in trouble for anything.
Right.
Just amazing.
I always think back to how I got detention because I didn't get my test. I got an A on the test.
Right.
But I didn't get it signed by my parent.
Right, exactly.
Forgot or whatever that day, and I got detention for that.
Right. Exactly.
And the teacher treated us like shit. Like
We're criminals.
Yeah. Like she closed the blinds. We weren't allowed to look out at the sunshine, and like the other kids were playing outside. And it's like, no, you've lost your privilege to do that.
Yeah.
You're here in detention. And I'm like,
right.
Because I didn't get my test signed that I got an A on.
I know, but I would get in trouble for staying up late to finish my homework and my papers and junk like that. Like,
Right.
Like, I'm in trouble for doing my homework, really?
Right.
Like, what kind of world is this? This is
now
so
go to your
screwed up.
room and not do your homework.
Right.
That's your punishment. I don't know.
Anyway.
Yeah.
Well, they didn't like it that I was going and hanging out with other friends who were doing crazy things.
Right.
And I was
like
wasting my time.
listening to music.
Yeah, right. And I was wasting my time with them. Like, I didn't need to be doing that. Anyway.
I guess you got more of the brunt of that as being a girl and also being the oldest. Whereas I was the youngest and a boy, so I was able to get away with just going out and playing and doing whatever.
Yeah.
Definitely less pressure on me that way.
Yeah, and when you were that age, at least some of that time, you didn't have, Dad wasn't around.
But he was around more for your childhood, I guess, than mine.
He was around more for high school. I mean, he was gone for at least one whole year of your high school. So, at any rate, so going back to the college thing, yeah, this ended up in a whole disaster, and I ended up digging myself in deeper, largely because of Christianity. And it's not like I was the only one thinking this. Like, I was bouncing ideas off of other people. I went to talk to the pastor at this church. And then I went down into the community, like at the school chapel. And then I went down into the community and went to a church and went to go see that pastor. And,
And you would talk to them about, I'm seeing this guy, he wasn't a Christian, became a Christian. You were kind of filling them in with those details and they were giving you advice.
I was doing that more with peers. With some of the pastors, I was a little more, I think I was a little more ashamed. And I didn't open up as much about that. And I was kind of filling them out a little bit too. Because again, I really was not sure that they could help me. And I didn't think that they would really understand, which they probably wouldn't have understood me. But, and, my quote peers at that school were all very mainstream, oh my gosh, so freaking white, just, vanilla all the way, completely vanilla school.
Right.
So I did not, there was even the arts department was so straight, mainstream.
And the guy you were dating, was he white or Indian or what?
He was Indian.
Okay.
And which is why he was attracted to me. I wasn't particularly attracted to any Indian. But at that school, so I was in that program.
Right.
So that program, there were about 40 kids in that program.
A lot of Asians in that particular group.
Yeah, 75% Indo-Pakistani, and about a quarter Asian, other Asian, Taiwanese, Chinese, Korean, and one or two token white people.
Oh.
No blacks.
Interesting.
Yeah. So within the community, right? So so I'm at college and I'm in this little group, right? That's a minority within this big group.
Right.
Within that group, I'm Christian.
And none of them were really Christian.
None of them are Christian. And it's a big thing for me, and it's not a big thing for them.
Right.
And they're all Indian kids, which I never knew any other Indian kid other than you.
Right.
Like, you were the only Indian kid I knew.
Right.
And you're not that Indian, really. I hate to break it to you.
Right.
But
no, I know.
So,
worst Indian ever.
right. I think I might be right behind you, but
well, I have the Twitter account, so that
okay.
That made it official. So.
Okay. Well, if it's according to Twitter, then
yeah, worst Indian ever.
Yeah. So yeah, so I was Christian, and they were all Indian kids of Indian doctors.
Right.
And no one in our family is a doctor. In our family, the church is the family business. Yeah. So it was weird. Like, and they're all rich. They're all rich kids from New Jersey that had, doctor parents, had lots of money, went to these, elite schools. And I did not fit in that group.
See, you hit on a key thing there that I definitely felt throughout my life up until the point where I left Christianity, left the church, which is Christianity to one's identity. If you're really, truly a Christian, it's kind of everything. It's kind of like, it's supposed to be, you're a Christian first, and then everything else.
Right.
So if that's the case for you and that's the case for me, if that's supposed to be the case for everybody else as Christians, then it's kind of like, okay, so you're automatically limited to this Christian subset of the population.
Yeah.
And then it's like, well, how are you connecting with this subset of people? Racially, education-wise, background, economically, financially, like in all of these other ways. Yeah. Physical attraction, interests, hobbies, passions. Within that Christian subset, how are you connecting with other people? And you just mentioned at the school you went to, you were not connecting with the people in the Christian community at all because they're not intellectual. They're not really pursuing higher education. They're not. But then when you go into the medical group, they're not Christians though. It's like a Venn diagram.
Yes, right.
It's a mutually exclusive Venn diagram.
Yes.
And the person that gets left out of either camp is you.
There was one other girl who was Christian. She wasn't Indian, though. She was Taiwanese. And she was my roommate. We were the two Christian girls. And we had such a toxic relationship from the beginning.
So the one person where it fit in terms of the Venn diagram, it was a toxic thing.
Yes. Yeah. With another guy in the middle. Yeah. Completely insane.
See, this sucks though, because I feel like, and this is also pre-internet. This is pre the world we live in now.
Right.
So back then, options are already limited.
Right.
In terms of exploration, expression, communication, meeting people out there in the world. And Christianity is this other layer that further crushes your options. It narrows things down to this subset of people that are probably not going to, you're probably not going to click with. And I know you, the person you are, and I know myself, the person I am. So it's almost like by us identifying as Christians and having that really be a reality in our life, like it's a truth for us that we cling to, we are doing such a major disservice to ourselves.
Yeah. But I did
throughout decades of our life.
I did feel like it was one of the, enduring features. It's one of the things I could hold on to that was always the same in my life.
Right.
Like I could always go to a church and know, all the songs. I could speak the lingo. I could fit in a church. I can still fit in a church.
Right.
I know what to say. I know the rules here.
Yeah.
Same thing like in a library. I can fit in a library.
Mm-hmm.
I know where things are. I can do that deal. But I mean, are those what I want to do?
Right.
No, but I can't turn my back on that because that's the only place where I can go.
Right. In the military, you're moving around every few years. People are coming and going, they're changing.
But the church was always the same.
Right.
And the church was always there. I mean, and the church was Dad.
Right. Well, I feel like for you and me, the constants I feel like I've been shedding these institutions in my life over time. It probably started for me shedding the military when I was basically kicked out at age 23. I was no longer military dependent.
Right.
So I no longer had access to going on base, going to the PX or anything like that.
Yeah, you definitely got out of that.
Yeah.
Before I did.
And that would just, by turning 23, that happens. Unless you enlist or, join the military. So I didn't do that, so I was out quickly. So that was kind of the first thing to shed. And eventually later I left the church and whatnot. Yeah, but it totally makes sense that we would cling to some constant thing. And I think for both you and me, like it was our family.
Yeah.
Meaning not even grandparents and cousins and extended family, because we didn't have that when we were young. We were the only family here.
Right.
So literally just you and me as brother and sister and our parents.
Yeah.
That was a constant. And God, church, Christianity, and I guess being within the military, even though the military is shipping you all over the world against your will, like you have to get up and go. So even though that's your identity, it's kind of like it's completely ruining your identity because it's not giving you a second to relax and focus on who you are.
Well, that is the whole point of why they do that.
Right. Right. So it's kind of a toxic influence on you establishing your own personal identity.
Yeah.
Uniform
service, not exactly the, harbor for individuality.
Right. Did you ever end up reading Third Culture Kids?
Yeah.
Yeah. Because I read that book and it talks about delayed adolescence. And that's exactly the case for us, is when people like you and I, when we shed the things we thought were our identity, like religion, military, whatever. And those are things that the ordinary kid at age 12, like that's not part of their identity. They're growing up in the same environment. Maybe a white kid growing up in a white neighborhood, surrounded by all white people at school. They all know their name. They all know the family background. Maybe they've even been there for multiple generations and they got their grandparents. Like everything around them is mirroring. So they don't have to worry about all that stuff.
Yeah.
They don't have to worry about, hey, we're going to be uprooted tomorrow and you have to leave everything behind and go live on the other side of the world or country. They don't have to worry about that.
Right.
So they can spend that time in their adolescence just figuring out who they are, what they like, what they want to do with their lives, whatever.
Right.
We didn't have that luxury.
Right.
A lot of other kids, diplomat kids and missionary kids who move around the world, they don't have that luxury.
Right.
So by the time they finally are able to sit down and question these things and evaluate who they really are, that's what it talks about in Third Culture Kids about delayed adolescence. It ends up being people in their late 20s, early 30s when they kind of start to figure these things out for themselves. And that was the case for me.
Yeah.
And for you as well.
Yeah.
I think around
then.
Yeah.
I feel like when I was a little kid, I was too much of an adult. When I was a teenager, I was too much of a little kid. And as an adult now, I'm too much of an adolescent. Like, I've just been phase shifted out of my life zones. Like, I just did the chronology wrong.
Interesting. It's this weird, fucked up Benjamin Button thing.
Yes, exactly.
It's all wrong.
It is just not. Again, it's a thing that just, you can't really dwell too much on it logically because it your head will explode.
Yeah.
But if you follow things from A to B to C to D, I mean, it goes around in a, like, confusing disaster web, like, the route to Albuquerque for Bugs Bunny, but that's how I got there. And I just really feel like Christianity was a big piece of that for most of from 12 to 30, that really fucked up my head in a really confusing, vicious way that it has been a lot of work to untangle.
Yeah.
A lot of work, a lot of heartbreak. I mean, I'm really glad you're doing this podcast. I wish there was things like this.
I know. That's partially why I'm doing Confusianity, is because I wish I heard these kind of conversations and these kind of stories and had this kind of influence when I was 28, when I was 25, when I was 18.
Yeah.
Somebody challenged me on that recently and thought I'm doing Confusianity to, like, get rid of Christianity from the face of the earth and, take everybody's religion away from them. And I was like, no, that's not what I'm doing at all with this. My intention is, if religion is working for you, like if you're a white male, white female, growing up in the Bible Belt, and everybody for generations you all believed the same, you're going to heaven, and everybody around, and all the people on the other side of the earth are going to hell because they believe something different. Like, and that's your worldview, and that's your entire community. Religion is working for you.
Yeah.
There's no point to me trying to convince them of something that would make them an iota more depressed or anxious or worried about their fate after dying or anything, because they're good to go. Like, that's checked off, that, like, their identity. They're like, I'm not trying to convince them of anything. But I do know that there are people out there, whether they're in a cult, whether they're in Christianity, whether they're Catholicism, there's all kinds of stories of people who are struggling and lonely and depressed and miserable, and it doesn't feel right for them.
Yeah.
And yet they cling to Christianity, they cling to their cult, they cling to the religion, and they feel like, well, because there's no other way. Like, either I've always been in this community, or I've chosen this identity, but I can't change my mind about it, or they're still afraid of hell or whatever. They're still operating out of fear. Whatever the reason, I feel like a lot of people just don't have a way out. And that is where Confusianity comes in, and where I really want to connect with people and put that message out there, that there's always hope. Because I think, fine, I post a lot of religious memes and whatnot, but that's also part of my message too. Is like, I don't really take anything so seriously, where, like, I don't really believe in this idea that anything is sacred. The concept of something being sacred, like, oh, you can't touch that.
Right.
You can't make fun of that or make a joke out of that. I'm like, no, I think you can pretty much make a joke out of anything. And not in, like, a negative, nasty way, but just, like, to laugh about life. And because it's all, to me, kind of a cosmic joke in a way.
Christopher the Mill, yeah.
Yeah. Because I've experienced the power of humor and comedy in my life. Like, to me personally, it really cheers me up. It really lifts my spirits.
Yeah.
And I think there's actually been studies about that, like people with health conditions, and how humor has really helped them.
Yeah, there are therapists who make you laugh.
Yeah.
I mean, literally, that's their job. Like, their homework is to go home and laugh for 15 minutes.
Oh, yeah.
Yes.
Yeah. So there is something to it. So...
well, I didn't say it worked, but...
Oh, okay. Well, I can only speak for myself, but I definitely feel better when, as serious of a person as I am, I feel better when I'm laughing and, at stand-up or,
Yeah.
just like, I really enjoy laughing and comedy. So I think that's part of what I put out there with Confusianity, is just like a lighthearted take on very serious subject matter.
Yeah.
But I do think what's serious to me is people's lives and the decisions people make in their lives, often for the worse.
Yeah.
In your case, and in my case as well, growing up, because life is so short. And, a lot of people say a lot of different things about regret. I think in the end, a lot of people have regret more so for the things they didn't do in life than the things they did.
Right.
But that's the problem with Christianity and religious thinking, is it limits your experience in life.
Yeah.
And that is regretful, I feel like.
It limits your ownership of life.
Yeah.
That's what I felt. That's when I came out of religion, just the idea that I owned my life, that I had a right to my life and to control my life was immensely liberating.
Yeah.
Just that was the shackle that I could not break before, and that kept me stuck in all of these places. And, kind of going back to my narrative, my timeline, I went through a period, I had a whole collapse in finally at the end of partway into medical school, partly because of this guy who would not leave me alone. And I didn't think of stupid things like, why don't you just change your phone number? Or, but no, this was meant to be. And if God really didn't want me to talk to him, God would take this away.
Right.
And blah, 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 blah. So I progressed out of that. And then I did this dance for about 10 years where I believed in Christianity and in God, but not in the church.
Right.
So I was willing to talk.
Because you will get that message from people in the church. It's a sort of apologetics where it's like, we're all sinful here. We're sinners here.
Right.
You can't judge God based on the church people and whatever, because if you do that, we're never going to be good enough.
Right.
And that's the point. Only Jesus is good enough.
Right.
So in that tap dance you're saying for 10 years or whatever, they'll give you that message too, which will keep you in that. And you're like, okay, right. The church is shitty and priests are abusing children and these people are being racist toward me and I feel ostracized and isolated by church people, but
right.
I should still stay in this because God up in heaven and Jesus over that, they're pure and perfect. And that's why I'm here, right?
Right.
To live in this shithole environment where people judge me and I feel lonely and miserable. Right?
Yeah.
And they're like, yep.
And there was so much mental gymnastics involved in going to church on Sunday, listening to this message, and then I would translate it into something that made some kind of rational sense to me, because the stuff they were saying was not right for me. And I knew that was dangerous stuff and that they were full of bullshit. But, and then eventually this work of having to constantly...
The mental gymnastics, yeah.
Yes. So, and it's so stupid, the thing that happened to me. So I was talking to a 16-year-old general's daughter. Let me tell you, she had some issues. But we were talking about religion, and we were talking about, well, why do you believe in God? And I said something like, well, we all have in us this innate, drive for God. Religion is a part of every culture on earth. Mm-hmm. I think that must be there because we have a creator. And she just said to me, well, what if we think we have a creator because we have that drive? Just randomly have that drive. And for some stupid reason, that had never occurred to me before. I mean, it's the most ludicrous thing. It's so obvious, but it had never occurred to me before.
Well, yeah, that's what I was kind of talking last time in the podcast with Damien about. We can generate religion. It makes sense, and God and all these thoughts as a coping mechanism, as a survival mechanism. That makes sense. That actually makes logical sense. Why there is religion in the world and why we would think that there's a God. That's a nice, pleasant idea to help you get through an objectively rough life.
Yeah.
Whether you're a caveman, that's a struggle just to find food and stay alive, or nowadays, suicide rates going up. People are just miserable, and men and women, young and old.
Right.
It's tough to make it through life.
Right.
And part of a coping mechanism of getting through life is believing that there's a God in the sky or whatever who loves you. And he loves you so much he would murder his only son for you and pour blood all over you.
I know that's another mental gymnastic that I really had a hard time getting over forever. And finally I said, you know what? I don't need to get over that. It is fucked up. Mm-hmm. I'm just going to call it. I see it. That doesn't make any sense. I mean, for the longest time, and I was just thinking, and I guess when Lisa made her comment to me, I had already knocked down so many other barriers that was just like the last straw. And I'm like, you're right. You know what? I need to let this go. This is just...
And you were about how old then?
29.
Okay.
Yeah. I kind of kept up appearances, largely because I thought, this would really be upsetting to mom and dad. And I thought they would feel like failures as parents.
Right.
And, so I kept up appearances and I didn't really say anything to them. But, I mean, it's part of the thing that also, like, has led me to these, bad relationships. Like, with my ex-husband, he was just Christian enough. Like, he could talk the lingo too, that I thought it would be acceptable to mom and dad.
Right.
But he was not really...
A proper, good Christian guy.
Right, exactly.
Yeah.
And
whatever that means, but...
Right. Air quotes. But he was not in the church, and I didn't have to worry about that. So it sort of checked like this weird box that I needed that's hard to find of a guy that is religious enough to satisfy his parents, but agnostic enough to satisfy me. And
so you were already identifying as agnostic when you got married?
Yeah.
And you got married at like 30?
29.
Oh, so shortly after that.
No, wait, no, 27.
Oh, so you were already married, and then you had this epiphany or the shift.
Yeah.
So within marriage, you started to have this shift toward leaving religion.
Yeah, but I had already been like stepping away and stepping away and stepping away and stepping away.
Okay.
But it was important to me still to be able to have something to show mom and dad. Like I wasn't totally out when I got married. And it was comfortable enough for me that I had someone that was familiar with the church. His mom was in the church. And
yeah,
for whatever crazy reasons, I thought she was supportive of me. And
his mom?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's the thing about the whole Christian thing. It's like, I'm all about people's true colors, right?
Yeah.
And at the end of the day, when the shit hits the fan, you get to see people's true colors.
Yeah.
And that plays out in a lot of different ways. Like all of the talk in the church days of Christian brothers and sisters were all...
Oh, yeah. Right.
Such bullshit.
Yep.
Such bullshit. Again, it kind of gets me back to like... And that was a big part of my leaving religion and the church as well. It was just another way of one of the promises of the church and God, the scripture,
Right.
that falls flat on its face and leaves me outside in the dust looking for crumbs. But really the reality is this is all bullshit.
Yeah.
Because like Christian brothers and sisters being there for you. No, like all my Christian and brothers and sisters, they around late 20s, early 30s, they all went and got married and started having kids and they disappeared.
Yeah.
They literally did that.
Right.
And I'm left feeling like, hello, Christian brothers and sisters, where are you? What happened? Oh, okay, I guess I just need to stay within the church and go find some new Christian brothers and sisters.
Yeah, they're living the dream.
And wait till they leave me when they get married, unless I do. But at the same time, nobody was dating me anyway within the church anyway, so it seems like that would probably be the likely outcome.
Right.
Or I could leave the church and fuck this and go date some non-Christians and see what happens.
Yeah.
But
gosh, just the ability to think for yourself. Like, I could have stopped so much pain in my life if I didn't make excuses for things.
Yeah.
If I just said, you know what, this relationship sucks. I know it sucks. I'm just leaving.
yeah.
Forget this. I'm changing my number. I don't need to be a witness to this guy. Like, I don't need to manifest God's love, to convince him of anything.
Right.
Like, this is killing me.
Yeah.
And I can just cut this off. But I felt like, well, God killed Jesus. So maybe this is what he wants.
Yeah.
Kind of like, that's the precedent.
It's like he wants his people to sacrifice because he set the
Consider
precedent.
it pure joy whenever you face
Right.
trials and temptations of any sort. So, I mean, there's stuff in the Bible to justify this. And it's not like all along the way I was just in my own head thinking these things. Like, I got diagnosed as delusional because I had a Jewish psychiatrist and he couldn't talk me out of these Christian, weirdnesses. And I'm like...
Well, he was kind of right, I guess.
He was.
Christian thought is highly delusional.
But
we literally have an imaginary friend in the room that we're talking to.
But it's collusional as well.
Right.
So it's not like I was the only one thinking these things.
I just posted a meme on Confusianity the other day. The only difference between a cult and a religion is the size of the congregation.
Yeah, basically.
You know?
Yeah. Right. And I was, talking to people, and I was, so immensely depressed, right? And I mean, like, really clinically depressed, losing weight, not able to sleep, not, failing my classes, no energy, like the whole thing, right? Mm-hmm. And I was telling people this, other people in the church, and, going to Bible studies and what have you, and saying, this is what's going on in my life. This is what I think it means. I think God wants me to be in this position, but I really hate it. I'm really suffering here, so I don't know what to do. And none of them told me to leave that guy. None of them told me anything like that. And if they would say something, well, let's say something kind of milquetoasty, sort of generic. And I'm like, well, what about this verse where it says, where Paul's talking about, God gave me a thorn in my side.
Mm-hmm.
And they'd be like, yeah, let's have ginger snaps now. Like, I knew the Bible better.
Right.
And I couldn't find anybody who could help me with these issues. Like, is there not anyone who actually reads this book? Mm-hmm. Like, isn't that what we're supposed to be doing? Like, I'm actually reading this freaking book.
Right.
I actually know these freaking verses.
Right. That's the ironic thing, is that a lot of agnostics and atheists and people who leave religion are the ones who actually know the Bible the best.
Yes.
It's like if you look in the Bible and you read it and you know it, you kind of start to realize more quickly if you really meditate on it and absorb it. Honestly.
Right.
I don't mean in a vindictive, like trying to prove the Bible wrong way, but like even as a believer, people like us who we wanted to believe in the Bible for so long, for decades, we studied it, we knew it because that was the Word of God.
Right.
We're the people who ultimately it almost kind of drives us away because you realize like...
It's maddening.
Yeah.
Yes. I don't know what literary qualities maybe someone can find in it, some value, but it is just maddening trying to make it internally consistent. And try to draw lessons from that and build your life on that.
Yeah.
Just...
It's stupid when you think about it, though. Why should an ancient text from 2,000 or more than 2,000 years ago be giving you the principles of how to live in the year 2019, like with the internet and all of the things we deal with now?
Right.
I mean, on the one hand, you could say, well, human nature is always human nature, and some things don't change like that. Like, people are kind of assholes back then, people are kind of assholes now. Fine. Yeah. There are some universalities, but...
Okay.
But still, it's like there's just so much in the Bible that's just talking about women are unclean and, if they have a girl baby, and like they should be kept outside the tabernacle and women should cover their heads and not speak and,
Although I do have to say, like, an entire week off every month, like, I'm not sure that's such a bad thing. But anyway, just saying. I could chill in a tent in the desert by myself and be perfectly happy.
Or like not eating shellfish because that's an abomination unto the Lord. Like just these things that, it's like, are just ridiculous.
Yeah.
For somebody nowadays to be like, oh yeah, I won't go to Red Lobster because shrimp is an abomination to the Lord. I mean, that's just... You never hear anybody saying that because that would be fucking ridiculous. But
right, because that's the Old Testament law and Jesus came and blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But again, the mental gymnastics and the constant like...
And yet they say every word of the Bible is God-breathed, like divine scripture. So It's like the mental gymnastics.
Right. It's just so exhausting. And it's not that I couldn't and like I didn't want to make decisions for myself. They actively tell you not to make decisions for yourself. Right. And that is such a destructive influence to a young person in the position I was in. Mm-hmm. And to a lot of other young people. I find it incredibly irresponsible when preachers get up on the pulpit and they say stuff that applies to just them in their own particular situation and culture and
I think
mindset.
I think one of the worst things is when these preachers get up there and they're married and have kids and they give a little sermon or a little sermonette or story or whatever about what it's like them being a father to their children and how they've really gotten to experience God's love and understand things now that they're a parent.
Right.
And like seeing your child grow up and like how they love their child, they know that God loves them. And that'll be a big thrust of their sermon. And I'm sitting there as a single person in the audience, like, fuck you, man. What about those of us who are never going to get to be a father? We're just supposed to take your word for it about how awesome that is for you?
And I'm like, great for you.
Yeah.
This is not helping me.
Right. And their answer to you is like, oh, well, keep praying about it. And look here in Proverbs,
And by the
12,
way,
23,
his
whatever.
son was crucified. Like, did you miss that part? Like, where is the love?
Right. And the fact, like, I always go back to that Abraham Isaac story too. How God asked him to sacrifice his only son. Christians will point to the part where he's like, yeah, but he told him to stop in the end. And they gloss over the part where he asked him to do it in the first place, which is just a sickening thought to begin with. I don't care. I mean, it's like to test Abraham's faith.
Right. Although that is probably a perversion of some other Middle Eastern religion story that worked its way in there. So it's probably not even really, I mean, none of it's, well, if you believe it's real, then fine.
Yeah. And you know a lot about these other, like how the Bible got to be the Bible and a lot of these other influences and that. Like that's a whole nother direction we could go off on.
Yeah, I'd have to bone up on that. But I did audit a course, like a Stanford course, on where the Bible comes from, the biblical texts, and the original Greek and the Hebrew, and where they come from and what they say and what agrees with what and what doesn't. And, yeah. Trying to make, if you know those things, trying to have it make sense. Oh my gosh. There is just no way you could believe any of it.
Yeah.
Like the priests would, well, this is kind of like the difference between the Talmud and the Torah. I don't know if you know this, but the Torah is kind of like the verses that we have. But the priests would invent stuff. Like if they couldn't figure out what this passage meant, or if they lost some of the words and stuff, they would put things in to have it make sense, whatever they determined that. They literally just made shit up and put it in the book. And that's the holy thing that people like worship now.
Yeah.
Like just pulled it out of their ass.
Right.
Like what could be more random than that? And yet that's what people worship and base their lives on. This is just so, I mean.
But that's why most Christians don't even dig that deep into the scripture, because if they did, they might actually realize these things for themselves.
I didn't when I was a Christian.
You didn't what?
I those are things that I learned after I left Christianity.
Right. Well, that's the thing you'll never hear in a Bible study or in church. They don't give you any historical context or like how the Bible was formed.
Right.
Like
all you need to know is the God breathed.
Yeah. Just read don't even read every word in this Bible. Just take our word for it that every word in this Bible is the divine word of God.
Right.
Because what I'm trying to do with Confusianity, with Bible Says What, the series, is showcase the verses of the Bible that people never preach on.
Right.
But it's in the fucking Bible.
Yeah.
There's some really messed up shit in there.
There is. And I know people just like read it, and like they're in church and they just want to have the cookie and coffees at the end. But, some of us actually listen to what's going on.
Right.
And some of us can't help but think about like, wait a minute, what?
Right.
How did that work?
See, that's the thing. Like, it's like the education system in America. It's kind of like repeating second grade every year. The way if you just go to church and go to Bible study, they preach the same sermons over and over again.
Yes, but you get something different about it each time, right?
Yeah, sure. But they also omit the same parts of the Bible over and over and over again.
Right, sure.
So it's like learning about American history. Right. Let's say you're in second grade, third grade, fourth grade, fifth grade, sixth grade, and you're taking American history, U.S. history every time. And every time you relearn it, they leave out the part about slavery in America. And you never get that message that like, and you just sit there as an adult in life and you're like, America's great. We got it all right. We always do.
We're the good guys.
And like, yeah. And then somebody else comes along and tells you, but about the African slave trade and the Americans held slaves here and you're like, what? Like that's not part of our history. And then they can open up the proper history books and show you it's there. It's the same thing like that with the Bible.
Yeah.
It's like there's so much shit in there.
Yeah.
It's just people.
We are at war with Eurasia. We are not at war with Eurasia.
Like people are not taught it in the Christian realm, even though it's in the Bible. They're not taught it.
They're also not taught to think for themselves.
Right.
Which is.
But again, it's like there's a great South Park episode about that. Did I show it to you?
I don't know, but
where they go to church.
You should be suspicious of people who tell you not to think for yourself.
Right. That's another theme with Confusianity. That's kind of one of my main themes is like, if you want to stay a Christian, fine. Stay a Christian, have your social circle. If that's working for you, great. If you want to leave the church, or if you're already an agnostic, an atheist, if you're a Buddhist, if you're whatever. But my whole thing is, think for yourself. Use your brain. Think critically. Because even me putting that message out there is a message that you're not going to get from the American education system. You're not going to get that from mainstream media. You're not going to get that from church and the religion and the Bible. Like literally there's scripture in the Bible that's like, lean not on your own understanding.
Yes, I know. Exactly.
But trust in the Lord, you know. It's like it's always
that was one of Dad's favorite verses.
Yeah, right.
And I mean, you get that from childhood.
It leads you to always be continually doubting yourself.
Yes.
Instead of having a natural doubt of external influences.
Exactly.
Because I think at the end of the day, after everything I've been through, I'm a very skeptical person. It doesn't mean I'm necessarily super negative and pessimistic and jaded about everything. I try to be a realist about things. But at the same time, if there's something external to me, again, CNN, Fox News, you know, what my parents think or what the president thinks, what politicians say, what Big Pharma says, like whatever, like I take everything with a grain of salt and I'm like, okay, I'm going to think about this for myself.
Right.
And how do I feel about it? And what do I want for myself? What do I feel like are my needs? But I think, especially for people like us who grew up in religion, that is a whole mental exercise to get to that point.
Yeah.
I think it's different for other people who didn't grow up in religion. They have that luxury of just like common sense in the sense of, oh, I don't like this guy. I'm going to break up with him. Or I don't like this girl. I'm going to break up with her. And we don't come up with all of these cockamamie justifications in our head from God or scripture or whatever.
Right.
But yeah, I at the end of the day, I feel like thinking critically and thinking for yourself are big time tenets of Confusianity, I guess you could say.
Absolutely. And if you do that and you still believe in Christianity, go for it.
Yeah.
I'm not saying I have all the answers, but I do think you should be very suspicious of anyone who tells you not to think for yourself and to listen to what they're telling you instead.
Yeah.
That's a hugely destructive message to send to a child.
Right. Yeah. It just sucks because kids are so naturally curious.
Exactly.
And they're sponges, so they can actually absorb information.
Yes.
And yet we poison kids with misinformation.
Right. Right. It's a tragedy.
It's weird. Like, I've thought about it before too. Like, it's kind of weird, the whole Santa lie. Like, why we all deliberately...
It is weird.
Why we deliberately lie to children about Santa. And then at some point we're like, oh, by the way, kids, Santa's not real. Or they discover it for themselves and they cry and they're sad or whatever. And I'm like, what a strange phenomenon that is. You know?
Yes.
Like, all the adults are in on this lie. And kids, we spoon feed it to kids. And then we, like, break their hearts about it and tell them there's no Santa. Like, what is up with that?
Well, there's a book, which I haven't read. I've seen a podcast on it. I still want to get this book called The Sacred Mushroom and the Cross. I think I've told you about this before. I tried to watch part of it, but...
oh, yeah, I remember the mushroom thing.
Yeah.
I fell asleep, I think.
Yes. Because it's a lot of details and what have you. But the premise of and so it's written by, and one of the Gnostic media guys, I'm blanking on his name right now, but he talks a lot about this. And did a lot of research into this. It's one of the guys that's the only non-priest who was hired to translate the Dead Sea Scrolls. And he posited this idea that Christianity and the messages of Christianity were all code, and that it was really all about, you know, the people in the know, the priesthood and the hierarchy, they could interpret the code. And that's what was passed down from generation to generation through the priests. And they had that special information. The rest of us, it's just like funny stories. Or not so funny stories, as the case may be. But they had this code that really was applying to this hallucinogenic mushroom that could do stuff. I don't even know what. It was just mind-altering.
Mm-hmm.
And that it was all about how to, coerce people and get power and, so on and so forth. But that there were all these different messages that were coded into the stories. So the one story about Santa, or the one speculation about Santa, is that, so in the Nordic regions, right, there were people who brought, went out into the woods, collected mushrooms, and brought them to your house. We even have like a little nutcracker smoker guy like that, mushroom collector. Right over there, actually. Yeah, that guy with the lamb there.
Yeah.
Yeah, unfortunately I knocked him over and broke the mushroom thing that he was carrying on his back. But anyway, another one of the random weirdnesses about our life. But when it would snow, right, people would get snowed in, and it would be like above their door. So if you're walking and there's 3 feet of snow and it's a, pretty stout, unsophisticated house, you go in through the chimney.
So this is one theory for the origination.
So he takes his
of
sack
Santa
of
story.
goodies and he goes into the chimney and he distributes these, and then he leaves and goes to the next house.
Does he also make a list and check it twice?
Perhaps he does. I don't know. But when he's collecting these mushrooms, they are they're red. They're like, red little balls when you look at just the top of them. And you collect them and you put them in a tree, which the only tree that has anything on it in wintertime is a pine tree, right? Evergreens. And while he's collecting more of them, he sets those out to dry by setting them on the Christmas tree.
Like ornaments.
So they're drying out on the Christmas tree. He's going out and he's collecting more little red balls. And I mean, there's some like really crazy things. And when you look at the imagery in there, it's really compelling. Like when you look at the mushroom and then you look at the Pope and his garb, it's sort of like, wow, there's a lot of stuff there. I don't know if it's true, but
right.
Just, it's about as, I mean, maybe there's more basis for that than there is for the actual Bible, really. But there may actually be more real evidence for that.
Yeah.
But it's at least as plausible as the Bible.
Yeah.
Is the actual biblical story.
It's interesting to me that there are these ridiculous vestiges that exist today from things of ancient times. And they've just been around for so long that nobody thinks about it and question it.
So the fundamental premise that there can be messages throughout society that the majority of people don't understand. I mean, I think that's inherent in most of our symbolism, that there are levels of understanding and that there are symbols within symbols. And some people understand the very basic level and some people understand the genuine level. And this is a way for them to communicate about different things, across time and space, where you don't really have to know if you're in the know. You don't have to know if, person A doesn't have to really vet person B. You just, show this symbol. And if they are if they're really legitimate, in the same group, they'll understand it.
Mm-hmm.
And if they're not, they don't understand it. You don't have to worry about accidentally revealing something to someone who's not in the know.
Oh, that's interesting.
And that, yes, and that can be international. And if it's these symbols and these stories, and it's not language based, it's not specific to a language. Mm-hmm. It crosses all kinds of cultural boundaries. The Santa story's been around for however many years, right? We all know that. Different cultures, different languages, different times, different levels of technology. We all have the same story. But somebody somewhere knows that, it's about the mushroom traveler, and the rest of us think it's a, cute song about a guy with a bunch of reindeer.
Right.
And there may be other myths and other tales that are built into that story as well. But I think that there's a richness behind these things that we pass on as a culture that most of us just have no
clue
idea
about, right.
including me. I
Right.
also feel like I don't know. But, there are so many pervasive, repetitive kinds of...
Well, think about it this way, though. In modern times, how relevant is any of that old shit anyways? You know what I'm saying?
I don't know.
Like, I often think about this as somebody who used to think a certain way. You were saying how you used to explain things away or do the mental gymnastics to see how God's will fits into all this stuff, dating this guy, making this choice, whatever. Having come out of religion, I just look at things for what they are. Okay, it's rainy today. Okay, that's because that's the weather pattern, not because my mom prayed for it to be rainy today for her plants.
Right. Right.
But like people I know nowadays who are actually Christian, they think like this, that they read into things that happen
Right.
as if God did that.
Yeah.
And they'll cite that as a form of proof, quote unquote proof, that he exists or that he cares about them.
Right.
And I'm like, I guess I kind of used to do that too to some degree. Maybe less than the average Christian. But...
Yeah, but it never made sense to me. I did it too. I definitely did that. But I'm kind of like, well, what if it's not... I mean, kind of what George Carlin says. Well, if it doesn't come true, I'm just going to say it's the will of God and it's a cop-out. So what is even the point?
Right. I think that was one of the things that annoyed me even when I was a Christian.
Yes.
And then especially as I came out of it and then afterwards, this idea of like... it falls within that realm of mental gymnastics, but it's like... And this is also why I don't try to convince anybody out of Christianity, because... Or whatever your religious belief system is, because like people are going to believe shit, and that's the end of the story.
Yeah.
They just believe it, and if that works for them, that's it. We're done here.
Yeah.
Like there's nothing more to say. No matter how much proof or evidence I show you, or I show you like, see these books that were written 40 years after Christ died, and see how these three say this, and then this one gospel says this.
Yeah, exactly.
And like, no matter how many of these things I point out, it doesn't matter to them because they prayed that their child would have safe flight on this flight crash that crashed, and it crashed.
Yes.
And their child survived that. And because they prayed, right. That's why the child survived. Along with maybe 5 other people on the plane who survived, and some of them were atheists, but never mind about those details.
Right.
But like, they have that belief system, and no matter how much proof or evidence I show, they're still going to believe that.
Yeah, I mean, I would love to believe that there was some all-powerful force, looking out for my child.
Sure.
Why would I not want to believe that?
That's a pleasant thought. And also when you die...
To take care of them for you? Right.
The interesting thing is, like, you and I both grew up with a fear of hell and that whole thing, right?
Yeah.
And I want to ask where you are after I say where I'm at about this, but I feel like there was a little bit of that fear of hell as I left the church around age 30, 31. But like now, on a scale of 0 to 100, 100 being absolutely terrified of going to hell, I'd say my fear of going to hell is somewhere between 0 and 0.05%. Seriously. Like, I'm not afraid of hell at all. Like, I'm so much more convinced that I'm going to die and the Christian's going to die, and that's just it.
Yeah.
And that's a scary thing for me to deal with. That is far scarier to me than hell. Not because you kind of have to look at it sort of as a mathematical paradigm where it's like, okay, let's say these are 2 outcomes I'm just throwing out there. There's a lot of other options. People believe in reincarnation and we go to some planet and whatever. But like, let's just examine... You die, and that's it. Mm-hmm. Just like you didn't...
Non-existence.
Yeah, non-existence. You didn't remember before you were born, and you die, and it's just like that. Mm-hmm. You're just not there anymore. Mm-hmm. So comparing that idea with you die, and it's like Judgment Day, and God's like, did you believe in Jesus or whatever? Of come up here to the pearly gates and be with me in heaven and sing hymns and praises to me for eternity. Because, yeah, I remember how much I really loved standing on my feet for 7 minutes to sing these songs. I couldn't wait to sit down and stop. But to do that for eternity, yeah, that sounds heavenly.
Literally.
So, yeah, did you believe in Jesus or whatever? Like, no, I had my doubts based on all these factors. I think it was a story made up to manipulate people and control people. And so he's like, yeah, okay, you didn't believe in that. So I'm going to cast you down into hell now, and you're going to burn in fire for eternity. This is basically what we're comparing. Mm-hmm. This idea of I die and that's the end. That's just it. Mm-hmm. Not just me, but everybody. Or that. Heaven in or hell burning in hellfire for eternity. So if you break it down, the worst out of all of those, let's call it 3 destinations.
Okay.
1 is nothingness. 1 is up in heaven with God.
Okay.
3 is burning in hellfire for eternity.
Okay.
I think everybody would mostly agree the number 3 sounds like the worst.
Yeah.
And then number 2 is the nothingness. And then number 1 is the, like, eternal bliss in heaven. That sounds pretty awesome. Even if it's not sitting there singing praises to God, I think heaven could still be certainly nicer than oblivion and burning in hellfire. I would say. Most people would think that. Right?
Okay. Most people would think that. I'm not so sure. But
okay. So, granted...
who is this God that we're talking about spending eternity with? But anyway, go on. Right.
So, we could get into that later. But, like, so the heaven and hell is kind of like 2 options between this oblivion and the heaven and hell thing. It's just kind of like which side of the coin are you going to be on? Are you going to go up or are you going to go down?
Right.
So it's 3 things, but it's also kind of just like 2 things. This or that.
Right.
But I feel like the likeliness of this Christianity thing being true, and therefore my fear of the hell side of that, mathematically speaking, that's such a small percentage that I think this real. That's why I'm not that afraid of that anymore. Whereas I feel like I die and that's it. I've been starting to grapple with that idea the last couple of years, and it's terrifying to me because I like existing. I like doing the podcast. I like drawing a picture. I like creating art. I love listening to music. Like, all these things are being alive.
Right.
And then when I'm dead, I don't get to do any more stuff.
Right.
I don't get to connect with people. I don't get to say anything, do anything. Like, You're just dead. That sucks. And not only that, if you don't really leave any legacy behind, most people, their legacy is their kids. But then for the people who are rich and famous and talented, Michael Jackson or David Bowie, whatever, like, their music, their art, their craft is what they left behind.
Yeah.
But if you didn't even do any of that, a generation from now, nobody will even remember who you were or anything you did. So it's essentially meaningless your whole life. If you die and that's it. There's no afterlife. There's no reincarnation, right?
Well, if there's no.
Again, I'm just talking about if
those
it's
scenarios
between these 2
posed.
things.
Yeah. Uh-huh.
If it's either oblivion,
right,
or if there's this Christianity heaven and hell thing.
Right.
Or Islam heaven and hell thing.
Sure.
You know.
Pretty similar.
So that's something I've been kind of wrapping my head around, you know, as a reality, that this life is it. And let's say that is the truth. Then what? What are you going to do with that?
Sure.
You know, you're 41 years old and you realize that. To me, the appropriate response to that is like, wow, I've already lived half of my brief time here on Earth, and I already have a lot of regrets in terms of the things I've held myself back from experiencing.
Yeah.
I think I should just start to enjoy the rest of my time here and stop wasting so much time looking for meaning and purpose and everything, because maybe there's not.
Yeah, well, I mean, we've talked about this before, where I think the meaning is what you want it to be. It's your meaning. It's like you define what your purpose is. You know, like my purpose is to learn and teach. That's what brings me joy and satisfaction and happiness, and I can live for that. That's a driving force for me. I feel invigorated by that. And I don't have to have some lasting impact on anyone or anything. I'm happy enough just that the purpose I've defined, and you know, I think it's experiential. Like, the purpose of my life is my experience and what I want it to be.
Right.
And I'm the one who decides that. And I can make it crap, or I can give that choice to someone else, or I can
decide that for yourself.
Decide for myself and take my risks. And I'm taking a risk that maybe there is a hell, and maybe that's where I'm going to end up. But we have to take some risk.
Right.
I'm willing to take that risk.
Yeah.
If it means I get to at least live out the known rest of my life that I know I have.
Right.
Even if that's just till tomorrow.
Yeah.
This life, I know I have this. I'm not going to let the fear of some unknown thing prevent me from having what I actually have now.
Right.
I'm going to live what I actually have.
Yeah. That's something that a lot of Christians will say. Well, I'm not going to take the risk of being an atheist or whatever. Like, I'm going to put all my eggs in this basket because I don't want to spend eternity in hellfire. So they're like, they don't mind making the sacrifices in this life out of fear of that eternal outcome.
Everybody has to make their own decision,
right.
And that's fine.
Yeah, but what they think is they're taking the safer version.
I know, Dad thinks that.
Yeah, totally. He's an extreme case of that, where he would rather throw away this whole life, not enjoy music, not enjoy art, not enjoy traveling, not know his kids, not engage in meaningful conversation, on and on and on and on and on and on. Think about experiencing this human life. He will gladly forego all of that, sacrifice it all.
Right.
For that next life to come.
Right.
That, as I see it, it's highly unlikely.
Yes.
All his sacrifices in this life will be for naught.
Yes.
And to me, that's a greater risk, because you're risking the very known thing here of this life for some unknown thing. It's literally like, okay, I have $1 million here, and I'm on that game show, like, Let's Make a Deal or whatever.
Right.
And they're like, mystery box here. Do you want to give up your $1 million that you have right now that you could spend and live? Let's say $1 billion, actually. I have $1 billion here.
Wow.
That represents my life. That represents everything I can do and spend and live in my days of my life. Do you want to give up that $1 billion for what's in the mystery box?
Right. Exactly.
I think if you put it like that, most people would be like, you know what, I'll go with the $1 billion. I'll take what I got.
Heck, I'll take 1,000.
Right.
I'm not very entertaining at playing that game. Like, I will take what I got versus the nothing that is probably in that box.
But that as a metaphor, that's what's going on when people think so much about the afterlife.
Yeah.
And it's silly in a way, like in all the comments on the YouTube stuff that I post and the memes on Instagram and stuff, like you'll have a Muslim person coming in there. You'll have I've actually noticed there's been more Muslims saying this kind of thing than Christians, but they'll come on and say, you're going to burn in eternity. You're going to burn in hell because you don't believe what I believe, kind of thing. Mm-hmm. And that's basically like coming to me and saying, you should have traded in that $1 billion for what's in this mystery box. Yeah. Even though they claim to know what's in there. They have the arrogance to claim what's in that mystery box.
I mean, I feel I don't know if it's pity, if that's the word, or sadness or something, that, like someone like Dad, for example, he doesn't acknowledge that it's unknown what's in that box. He thinks he knows what's in that box.
Yeah, but he gets that from the scripture verse that tells him that.
Yes.
Which it makes sense that the scripture would say that because it's enforcing itself.
Right.
And making people, because whether it's the Muslim or the Christian, like they'll go back to the scripture, but they'll see here, these things are written so that we may know we have eternal life. Right. I'm like, so because it says in this book that you're supposed to know it, and you believe that this book is the word of God, that's your proof, quote unquote, that it's true. Yes. That you know what's in that mystery box. Right. So forget about my $1 billion here that you want me to just kind of give up to go for that mystery box. It's literally like somebody trying to convince me to give up my $1 billion to take that mystery box. And they're like, but wait, before you make your decision, let me show you this book. In this book, it says right here, there is infinite riches and eternity inside that mystery box. Okay? Uh-huh. Now do you change your mind about the $1 billion versus in the mystery box?
Right. No, I think I'll still take my $1 billion, thank you.
That's essentially what's going on. Like when people say these things, like in that metaphor, that's it. Like,
but people lie to themselves all the time, and it's a shame. It's I feel kind of sad for them that they're living in this weird reality that I lived in for so long.
Well, I would say this. I don't feel sad for the people who are living it up and living their life and they still identify as a Christian in this life. They're not really sacrificing anything. They're not really living the true Christian life, but they say they're Christian.
Yeah.
Because those are the people who the system is working for them.
Yeah.
And they're milking it for a ticket into eternal heaven.
Yeah, right.
So they have the contentment of going to heaven in the next life, even though it's probably not going to be anything.
Sort of like Constantine.
Sure. So, but these are the people who are like, you know what? I'm going to keep my $1 billion. But what are the magic words I need to say? Okay, I'll say them. Okay, so I'm also entitled to what's in the mystery box. Right. And they wash their hands of it, and they're like, I'm good. You know? Exactly. So for people who operate like that, I don't feel sad for them.
No, not for them.
They're kind of like, they're winning both ways no matter what, you know?
But for people who are trading and they really... And they don't realize that it's unknown. They're lying to themselves and telling themselves that, no, it's known. I know it's in that box.
That's why it's worse. It's the worst for people like us when we were Christians because we were sacrificing so much of our happiness and our life here.
Right.
We were hemorrhaging dollar bills from our $1 billion here as we were like, I believe it's in that box.
Yes, my life points were definitely trending down.
Mm-hmm. Those are the people I feel sorry for in that sense, and I feel sorry for myself for having lost so much time in religion. But those are the people who I feel I could help.
Yeah, and I don't feel sorry for myself. I feel like...
I mean, what's done is done, but...
Yeah, and I learned a lot from it, and I understand a lot of things that I wouldn't have otherwise understood. I understand the way big organizations work and... the way people like Dad work. I understand what it means to really live that life and what you have to tell yourself. And there's just lots of things that, I can see how things happen. I can see how people get sucked into cults. I can understand that. And I wouldn't know those things if I hadn't gone this path. And I wouldn't be the person I am now if I hadn't gone this path. So I can't really regret any of those things. Right. But yeah, it was a very painful ride.
Yeah. I mean... certainly, if you knew then what you knew now, you would have done things a lot differently.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right. So, we've covered a lot of ground. There's a whole lot more to cover, which I think we're going to save till next time. But before we wrap, I just want to ask my sister here if she has any concluding thoughts about anything we've discussed so far. Anything that sort of she wanted to add or stuff that was left out in the telling of the story. I don't know if you want to elaborate, actually, on the process of coming out of religion, what that was like.
Right, because I didn't mention that, which I think was your original question.
Yeah, you mentioned about the girl who said the one thing.
Right, and it was sort of the straw that sort of snapped things. But the bigger issue, that I had a major crisis before that, and I was sort of in the middle of that crisis when I was really questioning a lot of things. And again, I'd been questioning for many years, so didn't come out of the blue, but it definitely ramped up in the middle of my last year of training
as a doctor in residency, or
yes, and my fellowship. And in psychiatric training, you do a lot of introspection. You learn a lot of, and especially doing child psychiatry, you learn a lot of developmental theory, and makes you reflect differently on your past, and you get experience with other kids, and your view of what a normal, say, 4-year-old is like. You have no frame of reference for that when you are 4, but after you've seen several hundred 4-year-olds, it's a different perspective, and you can reflect on your own experience differently. And I did a lot of therapy through that, and a lot of working through those things, and a lot of the false premises that I based relationships on, what I wanted to get out of life, what I was hoping to get out of life, the way that I dealt with conflict, just so many things that had prevented me from having deep, lasting relationships with people, and from having the real satisfaction that I was yearning for, the real intimacy that I was yearning for. And after learning all that, after learning how to do that, after making connections with people like that, I mean, it was sort of a very perfect storm of odd events in that I did my training in the military, but in that hospital, I fit in for the first time pretty much ever in my life and was recognized for things that are genuinely me, as opposed to something I was trying to be. I didn't have to try to fit into that. It was a great experience, and then it ended. And 9/11 happened, which I know has a lot of meaning for a lot of people, but in the military, that shattered my world because everyone that I knew and was close to was going to somehow be involved in a war. I mean, it's obvious from day one that you have to have some kind of serious military action after that kind of event. Although it wasn't really obvious when or where or how. And everyone that I knew was just leaving this training program and going to their first duty stations. I mean, little did I know it was going to be whatever decades of war. I mean, that would have really freaked me out. But even still, just any war is a ordeal. I became very depressed. And, I just sort of felt so much, I felt grief. I felt loss of things that I didn't even have yet. I just felt like, finally for the first time in my life, I could see ahead this future of being with somebody and being married and having a family and having friends and, things that most people take for granted, like being in one place for more than a few years. I could see all of that, and I was making it happen.
Because you were already married at that point.
Yes.
And you started to feel your life taking shape for the first time.
And it just got ripped away from me. And because of this whole idiot thing.
The 9/11 war thing?
Yes.
Yeah.
And I really, I guess, just being in that crisis space where you hit rock bottom, where you're like, what am I really living for? What is really going on here? And it doesn't become a theoretical question anymore. It's always something that I wondered about, but it became a real, I need a reason to fucking get out of bed in the morning, because otherwise it's not going to happen.
Right.
And what is there? Like, what is up with this God thing? Is there a God? Is there, do I really think that? Am I going to walk away from that?
Well, did you feel like, because I felt like it's kind of like me leaving New York as well. Part of the reason why I stayed in New York for so long is like, I don't know where else I would go or what I would do next. So similarly with religion, I feel like if I left Christianity, if I disbelieved in God, then what? You're kind of leaving something for nothing. Unless you're going to go and replace this religion with a different religion.
I didn't feel that so much. I didn't know what I would replace it with, but I was okay with that. I mean, I grappled with the idea that maybe we just don't exist after life. Like you were saying, you were really afraid of hell. I guess the thought occurred to me, but it didn't.
Or afraid of oblivion.
That was more frightening to me. Just the meaninglessness and the just utter microscopic importance of me
In the grand scheme of things in the universe.
Yes, just the
Yeah.
such tiniest impact that I could have in any way. Like, what am I even doing? Like, if it's so painful for me to be even alive and to struggle with this, like, why am I doing it? Am I doing it because otherwise I'm going to go to hell? Am I doing it because God gave me this life and I owe him?
Oh, like when you say, why am I doing it and why am I staying alive?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then they put a gun in my hand and sent me to Iraq. That was really not the best thing.
Going back to what I was saying earlier about evolutionarily why we believe in God, why we believe in religion, I think a big part of it is to shield people from this very harsh truth that you were facing in that moment. Because it is gut-wrenching and soul-crushing to feel like maybe I have no soul, maybe there is no point to anything. Right?
Way back when, I mean, yes, but way back when I was 12, and when I did make that decision to become Christian, it was kind of a logical decision. And I really believed that it was the right thing. It was the true thing.
Right.
And that I wasn't just going along with it because it's the only thing I had known my entire life.
Right. It didn't feel like a lie to you that you're like, all right, I'm just going to buy into this lie. It wasn't like that at all. It was
No,
like
but
you genuinely believed it was true.
I also debated with myself
Whether it was true or not.
If someday I no longer think this is true, will I be willing to look at that evidence? Like, am I going to block out everything else and only do this because out of habit, I guess? Or am I going to, like, from here on going forward, am I going to look at everything
Right.
and constantly evaluate, reevaluate? As soon as this stops seeming true to me, I'm going to leave.
So you were pondering that at age 12 or whenever when you accepted it.
Yeah.
And then you came to what conclusion about that at that time?
Came to the conclusion that I do think this is true right now at age 12. I'm going to go with this.
But I want to still be open to information and truth.
Yes.
Yeah.
I want to do the thing that's real.
Yeah.
And partly that's because I felt like nothing was real.
Yeah. I felt like that a lot through my life too.
I mean, that's part of what I
No hometown, no real relationships.
Yeah.
No high school sweetheart, no first love, no. Everything was kind of like a pseudo representation of the thing it's supposed to be,
Sure.
but it's like it's not actually that. It's not real.
Right. I mean,
That's
you
how
could
I
make up
felt.
anything.
Yeah.
You could tell anybody anything, and no one is going to contradict you.
Yeah.
Like, you could say, yeah, I was, the star baseball player on my team back at my last place. It's like, okay. No, no one's going to say anything. They don't know. How are they going to know?
Right.
Or if, like, the people that you actually did have experiences with, if they say it didn't happen, maybe it didn't happen. Mm-hmm. Like, they're really...
I don't know if it was like a study that was done, but I remember hearing somewhere a while ago that a lot of military brats actually end up getting into acting.
Really?
Yeah, and performing arts. Largely probably for that reason. Like, we're always moving around and we have to pretend.
Yeah, right.
Like,
I could see it.
yeah.
And we get good at it.
Yeah.
And I was good at it. But that's also one of the things that made me have all these false relationships is I could just meld into whatever somebody needed me to be.
Yeah, exactly.
I just need some company and some companionship.
Yeah.
What do you need? Okay, I got it. I'm there.
Yeah.
But that's not a great way to have
No.
a lasting relationship.
No.
And it's not meaningful.
I'm still doing that.
Yeah, right. I'm still doing it too.
I just did that.
Right. But I was making headway in that. And I'm much better now than I was then. Oh my gosh, so much better now. But that took work because it's your instinct so much to, like, you could just make the other person happy and just everything can be fine.
Right.
Like, you don't have to argue about anything, just everything
See,
can
I
be
think
nice.
it cuts deep, though, for people like us because we were never taught and raised with the mindset of, what do you want?
Right.
What do you like?
Right.
That seems like a fundamental thing that most people operate under that principle, like maybe most non-religious people. If they're like, they don't like eating broccoli, they just won't eat broccoli. If they, don't like running, they just won't run. If they don't like that person, they won't date them. if they don't like these people, they won't be friends with them.
Well, it seems obvious when you put it like that.
Yeah, but that was kind of the common sense level I used to explain to my non-Christian friends at work when I was still a Christian toward the end. I would explain how there would be this guy in our small group and nobody likes him. He's very unlikable, very just... And I would spend so much time with this guy, like reaching out, trying to connect with him because he's like drifting away from the faith and we need to I need to be there for him as a Christian brother. And I realized after the fact, I'm like, I'm spending hours of my life and weeks of my life with this guy who I hate hanging out with him. He's really negative, really unpleasant. He just drones on, complains about the dumbest shit like all the time.
Yeah.
Like, no wonder nobody likes him. He's a complete miser and like he's no fun and not interesting in anything. He's just like an awful human being. I don't want to be mean or whatever, but like that's why nobody likes him and hangs out with him, whether they're Christian or not. But here I am putting myself in the position just to be there for him and give him company. And so I'm not really getting anything out of it. Mm-hmm. This is where I'm like doing something that I I'm not getting anything out of this. Like, I'm not enjoying it. I don't
Right.
like it. But I'm doing this because that's what I'm supposed to do. That's what the church,
Right.
that's what...
You're getting out of it, what you're getting is relief from the guilt you would feel from
Right.
not doing it.
Yeah, well put, well put. So I would talk about that with my non-Christian friends at the time. I'm like, yeah, I'm hanging with this guy. And they're like, I don't understand. You don't like this guy. Why are you hanging out with him so much? I'm like, no, you don't understand. See, we're Christians still. Like, he's my Christian brother in Christ and, like all this stuff. And I'm like trying to be there for him, even though it sucks for me. And like, this is what we do. We're like a loving community. We're there for each other and blah, blah, blah. And the guy was just slipping away from the faith and kind of going off in his own way anyways. And I'm like, and then I was also starting to weaken in my faith and religion as well at the time. And eventually I kind of drifted my own way. But then I kind of shifted into more of that common sense mindset, which I'm still struggling with.
Yeah.
Which is like doing what I want to do.
Right.
Hanging out with people I want to hang out with.
Right.
I've gotten better about it over the last 8-9 years, but like I obviously still have a ways to go.
Yeah.
Like dating people who I genuinely am attracted to inside and out and who I really want to be with and who I feel like I deserve to be with.
Yeah.
It's
and
not just putting up with shit.
Yeah.
Not just being a doormat, not just
Right.
turning the other cheek. And yes, there has to be compromise in relationships and whatnot.
Uh-huh.
But when you start out something new with somebody and you're already bending over backwards to please them and they're not pleased with how you're doing at all, it's
Right.
setting the tone for a future with the person where no matter what you do, it's never going to be enough for them. And I'm going to be miserable the whole time.
Right.
And that's not good. I want to be happy. And there's a lot of different ways that I can be happy. And part of that, like I said the other day, I can be alone and not get married and have kids. And I can still be quite happy.
Yeah.
Not a lot of people, not everybody can say that and mean it.
Right. Right.
But I've seen so many toxic relationships and people unhappy in marriages and all these kind of things. And I'm like, that's a danger that mainstream society and the church and your parents will not, nobody will come out and say those things.
Right.
But again, this is where I'm like, as an individual, you have to listen to your heart. You have to figure out things for yourself. And maybe some people figured these things out earlier in life than I did, but it's better late than never.
Yeah, absolutely.
And it's a process.
Yeah, it is. And it's not unique to people who came from religion or who came out of the military. I mean, we all have to negotiate the self-other and where we're going to draw the line in that and how we're going to, compromise and live with that. Everyone has to decide those things.
Yeah, it's a spectrum and there's a healthy medium. Unfortunately, we've been on the side of the spectrum where we completely sacrificed ourselves and just sucked it up and made the situation work.
Yeah.
So that the other person would be happy.
Yeah.
So we've been on that far extreme of it. And I think maybe a lot of people stooped in religion and that kind of thing have as well.
Right.
And we have to figure out a healthier balance for ourselves
Right.
in terms of being okay with what we want.
Yeah.
And defending it, but at the same time being so confident in it that I'm like, you know what, I don't have to defend this. It's my life. This is what I want for my life. I shouldn't have to feel bad about that.
Right.
Drop the mic, walk away.
Sure. Yeah. I forgot where how we started off on that track.
What you were talking about at the time of you coming out of religion and what all was going on.
Yeah, and we were how to, right.
And you talked about 9/11 and being in the military and the stress and the depression.
Right, right. Yeah, it definitely did make me sort of, fight for my life, and I managed to get out of the military and at least stay in one place. At least find a therapist I could have a long-term relationship with, if no one else. I mean, for years I really didn't want to meet anybody or have any friends because I really didn't think I could tolerate one more loss. Mm-hmm. And the only way to not lose someone is to not have anyone. I was fine with that. I just really did not want to meet anybody. I mean, I can do that because being introverted, I'm very happy on my own for long stretches of time. Mm-hmm. And because of my job, I have to see some people. But yeah, I eventually decided, I eventually came out of the church and finally started to think about what do I want? As you said, a question I had never really asked myself before. I mean, most people don't literally have orders telling them what to do, but that's how we lived our life.
Mm-hmm.
Not only do you have all the biblical commandments about what not to do, you have literally orders that someone will come to your door with a rifle and force you to do them if you do not comply. So,
Yeah, I never really thought about that because it never really got to that point. We just basically got the orders and we're like, okay, I guess we're moving here. And we just,
right.
But that's why we're very much people, Mom, you and me, we just go with the program.
Right. And
because we have to.
There's
no other way.
It's easier to not think about what you want. I mean, and if you grow up with it from childhood, the idea that you have a choice doesn't even occur to you. I mean, it didn't occur to me. Like, why would I think about, like, when I came out of the military, just thinking about where do I want to live? Oh my gosh. That was an unimaginable question to ask. I was completely overwhelmed by that question.
Right.
I thought, well, okay, maybe I should narrow it down by continent? I mean, how do you even do that?
It's crazy because you're so further along in life and so old, but you for the first time you're being faced with very basic, what do I do with choice? Where do I live?
I know.
Like,
I had no basis for making this decision. It's like, I've been presented with, here's 3 options, pick one, rank them, and then we'll send you to a 4th that you didn't even know about.
Right.
Right? And now...
And you get so used to that, it's mind-blowing to be like, oh, of all the places in the world, where would you really want to go?
Yeah.
And you're like, is somebody filming me right now? Like, is this happening right now?
Like what do I base this on? Do I base this on, where I have the most people, or where I have the best job opportunities, or where's the best weather, or, where do I fit in the best, which is probably nowhere. I mean, and at the time, you were in New York, Mom was in Virginia, Dad was in Japan, and I had just come back from Iraq. I mean, that's 4 people in 3 different time zones, which is kind of how we lived as a family for a decade at least. And so I certainly didn't think about, like, well, where's my family going to be? Which is a major concern for most people.
Right.
And even a lot of my friends were still in the military, so I'm like, well, they're here now, but I don't know if they'll be there in 3 years. So do I go where I know the most people? Because I don't really know what's going to happen after that. Mm-hmm. I was so floored by that question. I just could not even... And finally, the only, like, actual decision I could make was what car to buy. And part of the reason that I made that decision is because it's mobile. That's the only thing that I felt able to decide in my life was something that is intrinsically mobile.
Yeah.
I couldn't think, I read lists and, read stuff and all these things about, what kind of job and what aptitudes I had, and talk to people, and, what kind of career options there are, what kind of think tanks there are, what are the, top 10 cities on the money list, all these kinds of things. Just, and I couldn't decide what to do, or where to live, or who to be with. And it's like those 3 things were just running around in my head. Like, if I could pick one and nail that down, the other 2 could somehow, I could figure those out, but I couldn't nail any of them down. And finally I said, I'm buying a Porsche.
Sort of a midlife crisis kind of thing.
Kind of like, well, fuck all that. I like this. This is something I like.
Yeah.
And it's the only thing I could say that definitively about. Right. This is something I am choosing for me that I like. And that's kind of the only reason I did it.
Right.
Because
it was completely impractical.
it was totally impractical and not a good financial decision and
Right.
really bad timing and everything.
Right.
But I am kind of glad I did it.
Yeah.
It did sort of, kickstart me into making some decisions.
For you to start thinking about what do I like, what do I want, and then to actually follow through on it.
Right.
That I could see how that's a big first step.
Right. And then a little while later, like maybe a year or two after that, I finally had a moment one day when it dawned on me, I don't want to be a doctor. Mind you, I'd been a doctor for 15 years at that point.
Right.
It didn't really occur to me whether I want to be a doctor or not. It's been an immaterial issue since I was 15. I decided already and, stuck myself into that commitment.
Right.
Like, I was not getting out of that commitment for years. Mm-hmm. At that point, it's like, why even think about it? It doesn't matter. It doesn't matter whether I want to be it or not. I got to do it.
Right.
It's not even worth the energy to think about it.
Right.
I'd rather not know, actually. So after being a doctor for 15 years, one day it finally occurred to me, you know what? I don't like this. I was ecstatic that day. I was so happy.
That you were able to realize that and say
Yes.
that out loud.
Right. That I was able to make a decision about what I wanted. That it didn't have to be, what someone's expectation of me was. It didn't have to be what someone was ordering me to do. It didn't have to be what was in the will of God. It didn't have to be, some superstitious random events that happened at once that, would convince me that this is what God wanted me to do with my life. It was just like, you know what? I don't like it.
Yeah.
I just don't like it.
And yet here you are today, still a doctor.
Still a doctor. Which I recognized at the time I may still need to do this because this is probably my best chance of making money and earning a living.
Practically speaking. Yeah.
Sure, and I worked at Burger King and been a doctor. Like, these are my two job experiences. Like, it's...
That's insane.
Yeah, I'm not going back to fast food anytime soon. I don't think that's going to sustain my current...
Well, they are going to maybe raise the minimum wage to $15 an hour, though. You might want to rethink things then.
I could.
There's good money in the McDonald's racket now.
Be.
Oh, sorry, you said Burger King. I think they might buy both. You might be good. You might be good either way.
Right. Maybe we should think about that. Maybe, even though I'm against everything that stands for.
Mm-hmm. One thing I was going to say earlier when you're saying all this stuff, it almost kind of blows my mind sometimes when I think about the fact that we actually were able to disassociate ourselves from religion. Like, when you think about how much we needed it, how much we needed God, how much we needed Jesus, and for that to be a truth in our lives, and for that, because nothing else in our life was solid and firm.
Right.
We really needed that.
Yeah.
We're like the only brown kids in an all white and Korean Asian church that I went to. Like, even then when we go hang out with Indians when we're older and they're all like Hindu and their parents are all doctors and they come from money, like we don't click. I remember my freshman year I went to the ISA, Indian Students Association, did not click with them at all. Yeah. And then I went to Young Republicans, did not click with them at all. Yeah. And I'm like, I don't understand this. I thought this was supposed to be where I fit. Yeah. And I clearly did not. Right. But I stuck with Christianity and I stuck in the Christian groups, and there was always something about it that just didn't feel right to me. Like, I don't fit here. Yeah. But I stuck with it because that was the only thing left other than my family, you, mom and dad, like other than me coming home and living with my parents and just like us just growing old, living in a house, like that's just lame. Right. The only safe haven out there in terms of identity was to rely on God and be a Christian. So that's why I say it almost blows my mind. I'm amazed the fact that we were able to detach ourselves from religion, which to me is quite a testament to it really just wasn't true and it really did nothing for us. That's why we pulled ourselves away from it. We walked away, and we still struggle with all of the toxicity from it. Yeah. But we still keep walking further away. Yeah. And I think I say this for myself, but probably it's the same for you. That part of that vow you made at age 12. But for me, like, I want my life, and I think I started this when I was down and out at 30 as well, to be about pursuing truth And if someday it is revealed to me that there is the one true holy God and he's real and Jesus is the savior of my sins, I will be the first to be like, praise Jesus. This is the truth. I'm a Christian now, a real Christian, and it's true. And I would want to share with people the good news, but I have to be honest every second of the way. And right now, all the truth is pointing toward religion as a man-made construction used to control people and also calm people's fears, give them a hope for the afterlife, because death is imminent for everyone. That's a harsh reality.
Yeah.
I mean, how terrible of a thought that is, that some child will be born with AIDS in Africa. And you see that footage in those commercials with Sarah McLachlan singing in the background or whatever it is, and it's like...
I think that was the Humane Society.
Oh, yeah, maybe that's right.
Or Animal.
Oh, I'm thinking of like
ASPCA.
Tammy Struthers or...
Sally
Struthers.
Struthers.
Sally Struthers from back in the day. Sad songs and like these shaking, starving children in Africa or whatever. And they never had a chance.
Right.
And they're born and they're sick and they're in pain and they're suffering and then they die.
Right.
Now, Christians will come and say, well, they're with the Lord now. They're with God now. And he had a purpose and it's all a beautiful, wonderful thing. And that sounds like a very nice thing to say, which covers up a very harsh reality. And so I understand why people want to believe in religion and that kind of story. But that doesn't make it true. The truth could very well be they were just born, this sperm met that egg and got fertilized, and that being was born in Africa under those conditions, and they lived for a week and then they died or whatever.
Yeah.
And that's the end of that soul or that story. Maybe there's no such thing as a soul. That's just the end of that entity, that living being for a brief time.
Right.
That's a harsh reality, but we see harshness in the world every day.
Right.
The tsunami comes and kills whatever, 8,000 people or whatever. People try to find some kind of reason or purpose or higher power or God or poetic story about heaven and the Lord. But I look at all of those things like it's logical that people do that because it's kind of a survival mechanism to do that.
Yeah.
Otherwise there might be despair and mass suicide and depression if people are like, wow, this world is harsh and unfair. There's no point to anything. It's just nature, chaos.
Yes.
I mean, you look at the weather, you look at earthquakes, you look at tidal waves, you look at nature. People are destroyed by this planet. Like, it's harsh and unforgiving, this so-called Mother Nature.
Oh, it's less harsh for us as humans. I mean, can you imagine being a gazelle?
Right, the animal kingdom.
Right, from the moment you're born, you are a target.
Right, you're walking food.
And
or being born as a cow in one of those farms that's not organic, free range, all that stuff. Like that's
agony.
That's even a more horrible existence.
Yes. So it's actually better for humans, I think, than it is for most other beings on Earth.
Sure, but my overall point is...
Even then...
It's a harsh world. And if people are really honest about it, they'd have to come out and say, yeah, it is harsh. It's unfair. It's unjust.
Absolutely.
If people are really being honest about it, they'll say that. A lot of people won't even go that far.
Yeah, and, some people need the illusion. Like some people need to live in the Matrix.
Right.
They need to taste the steak. And if you want to live in that, knowing if you don't want to see the reality and you just want to live on that level, I think a lot of people do that. I think that's why there's a lot of alcohol and there's a lot of, mind-numbing activities, football games.
Yeah, distractions,
Facebook.
Escapism.
Right.
Because people are dissatisfied, uncomfortable, afraid of death.
Yeah.
And they're looking for something to take their mind off of it because... Whereas what we're doing right now and what we have done is we dive even deeper into that fear and despair and the meaning and truth of things. Most people don't seek truth that much because it's harsh and scary.
I mean, I don't want to make it sound like some noble thing. I mean, I genuinely feel that people who... there's no... I mean, I don't want to make it seem that there's some moral distinction between people who live in the Matrix and people who take the red pill. I mean, I genuinely think that if they are happy with that existence...
Right. Ignorance is bliss, sure.
That's great. But I can't do it.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, getting out of the Matrix is certainly not for everybody.
Right. And I can't feel the pleasure feels less real. And I don't want that. So even if the pain feels more real, on the outside, I would rather do that.
That's what The Matrix is such a great movie.
It is.
Because it gets people to really think like, wow, it looks so nice eating that juicy steak in the Matrix versus you're out of the Matrix and you're sitting there eating that sludge. Like,
Right.
is truth that important to you?
You're right. Right. And it is for some people and it isn't for some.
Right.
So, I mean, I do wish that people would make that choice more consciously. I think there comes a point in life where we all have to make a choice. That there's a crisis moment or there's some major decision where we have to decide which way we want to go.
About belief system?
Yeah, or about, whether you want to be an evil person or whether you want to be a good person, or in whatever generic sense you mean those things, whether you want to do the right thing, whether you want to do the wrong thing, whether you want to, go for your dream, chase your dream, or whether you want to settle. Whether you want to put your career above your family, or your family above your religion, or whatever the case may be. That there comes a point in life where everyone has whatever their dilemma is, their long-standing conflict that governs their life and their personality and their being. Whatever that is, there comes a point where you have to decide one way or the other. I struggle a lot with this, thinking about child molesters, of all things, I guess, that most people don't know that many child molesters. Unfortunately, I do. And when...
As a psychiatrist.
Correct. And, right,
Just want to add
clarify that. And actually, yeah, one of my first patients was a child molester. And, of course, I knew all the things that led him to become that and the horrible abuse that he suffered. Mm-hmm. But at some point, you can't
It doesn't justify, right.
At some point, he decided he was going to go the route of perpetuating that crime and not trying to fight against it.
Right.
And I don't think I think it was a choice. I think at some point we make that choice. But I think a lot of people just let that choice be made for them. They give away the right to that.
Yeah.
They let someone else decide.
Well, it's easier and people get to play the victim.
Right. You don't take responsibility.
Right. And nowadays that's so prevalent in our society. Everybody's a victim.
Right. Nobody
accepts responsibility or... Like, that was one of the things, I don't know if I said this in the first podcast episode, but I realized when I was miserable in the church and I was bitter toward all these people who were getting what they wanted, right? Like all my friends who were marrying and getting kids and moving on with their lives and leaving me behind within the church framework. And I wasn't. At the same time, they're telling me, oh, you're not allowed to go have sex and you're not allowed to go date non-Christians. You're not allowed to basically go be happy. Mm-hmm. But we're getting all our boxes checked.
Right.
And I'm miserable and I resented them and I was bitter. And then I realized when I came out of church, when I came out of religion, when I walked away and I started living my life, surrounding myself with people, becoming more entrepreneurial, dating non-Christians, doing all this stuff, just living life. Mm-hmm. I noticed my bitterness toward them and looking back at those people. Mm-hmm. Part of the thing that clicked in my head was, how mad can I be at them when I was the one choosing to be in that environment all that time?
Oh, yeah, that's right.
But that was when I accepted it's my fault.
Right.
For choosing Christianity, for choosing to be in the church, for choosing to surround myself with, racist people or whatever. At any point in time, I could have just walked away, and I didn't. Until I finally did.
It's like your analogy about the elephant.
Yeah.
When the elephant's young,
yeah,
you chain it to a post and it can't get away.
Right.
And then you just leave that chain around their ankle, and even though they become, a freaking 4,000-pound elephant, they still think that little string holds them back. Mm-hmm. They don't realize they can just walk away because, they're a freaking elephant.
Yeah. It's just like that.
It is just like that.
So I think that that was one of those key things I realized. And it helps the healing process too, because
Oh,
you don't want to
yes.
walk around bitter and angry about people who did you wrong in the past. You got to take responsibility,
Yeah.
you know, and be like, okay, well, I put myself in that situation.
Right. And I don't want to do it anymore.
Right. And I feel like there's so much of that going on now. Nobody takes responsibility for their... I mean, like, I look at the Louis C.K. thing, for example, and those comedian women went up into his room. They're there at 3 a.m. in the morning, and he wants to start masturbating in front of them, and they're upset by that. That's fine. They can be upset by that, and they can walk out the door, and that's what they did. But for him to have his career ended for that, I'm like, what do you expect to go to a guy's room at 3 a.m. in the morning and everybody's drinking and partying, and like, you think you're going to just sit around and open the Bible and read scripture verses or sing
Kumbaya.
songs?
Yeah.
Like, some shit is going to probably happen between heterosexual male and female in a group with drinking and like at a party late at night. Obviously that doesn't give him the right to do whatever to them. I mean, that's like, we still have rights, but like, that's when you get up. You chose to put yourself in that situation.
Yeah.
It would be a crime if he's preventing you from leaving and walking out the door, like, you know, rape or assault or something like that. But like, he's doing something, you're not comfortable with it, you walk out the door, and that's that. You know, but again, it's like we live so much in this society now where people want to just blame men, blame white people in general, blame the slaveholders back 200 years ago. Like,
Yeah.
blame God even.
Sure.
Where does it end? Like, I see women who are multi-million-dollar successful, and they're talking about how they're being held back as women.
Right.
I'm like, oh my God.
Yeah.
Like, do you hear what can you
not
not
getting
see
it?
this? Like,
Yeah.
meanwhile, there's a poor black kid who gets gunned down by cops walking on the street. Like,
Right.
the kid didn't even have a chance.
Right. I mean, there are actual victims.
Right. And
But-
there are women who are rape victims, and they're legitimate victims,
But-
and we need to help people and support people who are like that. But when everybody claims to be a victim,
Yeah.
you end up doing real victims a huge disservice.
Yes, it's very undermining it's very subversive and
It's
completely
selfish.
invalidates their experience.
It's selfish.
You know, actually, the military does this with awards. Like, there are many awards that everyone gets. Like, really, what is that? Is that an award if everyone gets it?
I've heard that that's how kids are being raised these days.
Yes.
Like, everybody gets a trophy.
Right.
Like, for like participate, or you get the best participation award, or you get this, so that there. And I've even heard they have kids playing in sports games where they don't keep score. Like, there's no winners and losers. In a soccer match, they just don't keep score.
Okay.
This is where all of this leads.
Yeah.
Because to have a winner and a loser means somebody is being oppressed, or somebody's a victim.
No, it means it's life, and you learn how to deal with that. It's not the end of the world if you lose.
Right.
You don't cease to exist. Life goes on.
Right.
That's what you learn. It doesn't mean, oh my gosh, it hurts to lose, so we should never lose.
Right. That's ridiculous.
Yes, it is ridiculous. And it's it's very demoralizing, though, to give everyone an award and then to make them take time out of their time to go and get it because you're required to have it. You can't opt out of it. So
You're talking about in the military
Yes.
context.
Yes. So I remember getting that award thinking, wow, this is like a punishment, really. And now every other award that anyone has, I'm going to look at that and think, was that just an award that everybody got? Like, do any of these mean anything? Because I don't know. Maybe, these people were in before me. Maybe that was the award they gave back then, that year, to everybody. I don't know. It just completely is demoralizing.
Yeah. That Indian comedian, I forget her name, she has a joke about the emoji. And there's like a new third place emoji. And she's like, what's the point of that, really? If somebody didn't win and you send them that, it's kind of like insulting them. And then let's say they actually got third place. You send it to them. It's like, it's still insulting. Because they didn't.
Is it not the point, though, to be insulting?
I guess. But why introduce this insulting emoji? Yeah, I was like, yeah, good point.
Yeah. I hadn't noticed that one. I might have to use that now. I'm going to send that to you.
Third place emoji.
Yeah.
Great job.
Hey, this is episode 3 of your podcast,
All
right?
right. Yeah. Good time for the third place emoji.
I guess so.
All right. So on that note, unless there's any final one-liners or anything you want to conclude with, and
Yeah, brevity is not my strong suit, so
Right.
I'll forgo.
You must really suck at
one-liner.
You must really suck at Twitter.
I don't do Twitter.
Right. Exactly.
I don't even understand that
Right.
concept.
Well, nowadays, as far as I'm concerned, it doesn't even matter. I tweet and nobody sees it. It's literally like just throwing thoughts out into a graveyard. And when I do see the tweets that are getting millions of retweets and all this stuff, it's just some celebrity quarrel or somebody saying something really offensive and then other people retweeting or tweeting responses to it. Like, this is terrible. And then other people retweet those tweets. And it's just that to me is all I see on Twitter. It used to be me
Well,
tweeting
it's,
random thoughts and jokes and whatever, and then other people would like it and share it and follow me, and then I would find people who had an interesting perspective about things. I would follow them, and about people connecting.
Yeah.
It used to be that, and now it's just this complete toxic shitstorm.
Yeah.
So you're not missing out on much with
right.
Twitter.
Exactly.
You missed that whole wave of. When it
I
was-
participated for about a half an hour one day, and I thought, I have nothing meaningful that can be said in this many characters
Yeah.
to someone that I've never met before.
Right.
I can't work that way. So I think that means that's a wrap.
Yeah. Cool. Well, thanks for being on the podcast. I think you will be back at some point because we have a lot more to talk about in terms of medical field, red pill.
That's a whole other different kind of
Media.
awakening, yes.
Yeah. So we will we'll talk about that next time.
Yeah, this was great. Thanks for having me.
All right.
I hope this has been enlightening for you.
Stick around. We'll be back in a couple weeks for episode 4, where I interview my good friend Marie up in NYC. She's an Aussie, from Australia. In case you haven't already done so, subscribe to the Confusianity podcast on your platform of choice. Currently available on YouTube at youtube.com/Confusianity and pretty much all the other major podcast platforms, Apple, Spotify, Google Podcasts, etc. For a list of all available platforms, visit anchor.fm/Confusianity. If you're listening on Apple, would love it if you left a rating and a review. And of course, if you know of friends and family who would enjoy the show, sharing is caring. Until next time, my friends.